Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel for a little bit of Heroes of Normandy. Now, it feels like an absolute age since I last played this game. And in fact, it is because I'm very sad to say, while I've been looking forward to this for ages because I really, really like this game, it is the first time that I've got it to my table since we had the awful news about the collapse and bankruptcy or whatever's happened with Devil Pig, latterly Pig from Hell Games. And I mean, what has occurred is very, very sad. Like many of you, I'm sure I've made a financial loss on the Heroes of the Pacific Kickstarter. Now, I don't fully grasp what exactly has happened. I'm not sure if the truth will emerge for quite some time yet. Certainly not until after the company's affairs are properly wound up. But my overwhelming emotion is really one of sadness, and particularly for Jan and Clem, who gave us this excellent game system and so many hours of enjoyment and camaraderie. In terms of what's happened to them, this is really quite tragic. And I, like many of you out there, I'm sure, I really, really hope that they find some way of getting themselves and this wonderful game system back on its feet. But in the meantime, I mean, I will always play this game, and I know the wider community out there is committed to playing Heroes of Normandy. And if it's any encouragement to Jan and Clem at all, to know that there are loads of us out there who are rooting for them despite what's happened, and we really hope all will be well in the end. Um, and I suppose in a way, in an odd way, as sort of an expression of that encouragement is that we are still going to have great experiences with this wonderful creation of theirs. I mean, nothing can take that away. So that brings me very nicely, moving on to happier thoughts, to why have I got Heroes of Normandy back on the table? Well, ages ago, a few of you got into a conversation with me about the prospect of creating scenarios based on our favourite war movies, and one came up in particular, which of course was Kelly's Heroes, an absolute classic of a film, which actually has very largely inspired a lot of Heroes of Normandy. You only need to look at characters like Clint, and I mean, Oddball. How unsubtle is Oddball? Both the German and the US ranks are swelled with people who are, more than a nod to that classic film. And so I set myself the task of trying to see if any of the actions in that film could be converted into Heroes of Normandy scenarios. And in pursuing this, I watched the film again recently, thoroughly enjoyed it, every bit as good as I remembered. But it also proved a little problematic because when you look at the actions that are portrayed in Kelly's Heroes, a lot of them are quite small unit. A lot of them are based on either, I mean, sound tactical sense involving the element of surprise, but this can make it one-sided and scenarios potentially unbalanced. There's also an immense dollop of luck, which is very difficult to replicate in a game like Heroes of Normandy, which can be quite swingy in a dramatically entertaining way. So initially, I'd looked at topping and tailing it. So there's the moment at the beginning of the film where the German intelligence officer is captured. But after a bit, I had to give up because effectively it involves the US player basically trying to drive a stolen vehicle out of a town that's absolutely teeming with Germans. And the problem here, as with so many of the scenarios, is foreknowledge. In the film, the Germans don't know there's a bunch of Americans driving that vehicle. On the game board, the German player would know, and there's no sensible way of creating a workable scenario out there. As far as I could see, I might have another think about it. There's the huge temptation to try and recreate the epic battle in the town at the end of the film. But again, I found when I tried to work it out, I mean, I really wanted to use oddball, but it's fraught with difficulty because the US forces place themselves superbly, but when the shooting starts, it's very much a surprise attack. And the US, badly outnumbered as they are, depend utterly on the element of a successful surprise attack with simultaneous strikes against the German garrison to even the odds for them. And in a game system like Heroes of Normandy, with its alternating, activation based on orders, you can't really do that so well. So with great reluctance, I gave up on trying to recreate the battle in the town. That left two battles in the middle of the film. One is Oddball's attack on the German garrison at a railway station. Now, 3 Shermans against a German garrison. On the surface, that seemed great. But when you watch the film, the German infantry don't really have any convincing anti-tank weapons. And the heaviest piece of ordnance they have available is a 37mm, anti-aircraft gun mounting. Not the kind of thing you knock out, 76mm Shermans with. So I tried a couple of play tests with that, but again, the way close combat works against heavy vehicles in this game, it would have been very uphill for the Germans to try and defeat Oddball's force. So I reluctantly let that one go. That left me with this scenario. Now, initially, I'd glossed over this because this is the ambush near the cultivated field. And for the benefit of those of you who've not seen Kelly's Heroes, my God, you people, what are you doing? Go and watch Kelly's Heroes. I'll wait. Watched it? Good. Okay. But for anyone out there who still hasn't watched it, there's a moment around the middle of the film where Kelly and his immediate band of soldiers are passing through a cultivated field where they trigger where they discover the hard way they're in a German minefield and suffer their first casualty. Now, the problem they have is that A, they've got to negotiate their way out the minefield, and B, the explosion has alerted a nearby German garrison who send a patrol out to investigate. The US, knowing what's coming, or the US soldiers, put themselves into what I can only describe as the perfect ambush position and wait for the Germans to arrive. And this is the basis of my scenario here. So in the film, most of the US force makes it out of the field. We're going to say that's the cultivated field with the mines in it, but I'm not using them for gameplay in this. There's a road running there, which is what the German patrol comes down. It's mainly men in vehicles, but they choose to stop and dismount. The US forces, meanwhile, are hidden along the edge of the road behind a stone wall. Now, the stone wall is in the film. I decided giving them a stone wall in this scenario would unbalance it way too much. So in a way, I've actually made it almost as bad for the Germans by letting them line a hedgerow. Now, the assumption is, in this scenario, the Germans set up first and they must deploy 7 of their units along the road. The 8th unit can deploy on this side of the German column, and that represents the main force is busy dismounting, but the group that got off first is heading towards the fields to investigate the blast. To all intents and purposes, the US forces are invisible. So the US player then sets up. Most of their guys will sensibly line the hedge, but they have got more units than they can put into cover. So, I mean, in this instance, I've taken a huge risk and put Lieutenant Parks over there. But to keep true to the spirit of the film, where the 30 cal crew was left behind in the field, the US must deploy their 30 cal squad anywhere within these 9 squares. I decided to compromise on concealment versus being able to see the target. Now I'm just going to zoom in a bit because this scenario is rather mean to the Germans. There's no way around this, I'm afraid. In trying to recreate a perfect ambush, there's certain horrible things you have to do. So if I do a quick flyby, the German road column consists of a mix of fire groups, recon groups, heavy machine gun guys, and they have got a Zunda. They didn't have one of these in the film, but I had to find some way of balancing the points out. So the points come to about 150, it's 150 per side. Just to make matters worse for the Germans, because they've been caught by surprise and they're out in the open, their recon groups cannot begin concealed. Well, they're shoulder to shoulder with the Allies anyway. And the MG42 squads are in march order. Now, in this setup, I decided the Germans would send one of their MG42 guys cautiously towards the field. Bit unusual, but they got off the truck first, and I'm going to start them inside some cover so they have some hope of surviving the horror that's going to come. The US forces are a fairly standard mix. They have Clint, of course, Clint/Kelly. And in fact, he's taking quite a lead position in the ambush. Their two fire teams and support teams are lining that part of the hedge. And somewhat bravely, I am taking a risk here. Lieutenant Parks, who, again, there's no lieutenant in the film with the force, but I need him to balance out the order tokens that the US have to receive. And then they've got a recon team hidden in that bit of terrain over there. So that is the situation. The Germans, they've heard the explosion. They're marching up through the countryside to come and investigate it. They have no idea that there's an American force in such close proximity, and they're about to get hammered. I don't really see this being a very competitive scenario, but I think it's actually a good one if you want to introduce someone to the bloodier side of Heroes of Normandy, and you want to be able to show them various things like assault, close combat, bit of maneuvering, even if it's only running for your lives. I have decided that I'm also going to make it quite brutally short, perhaps as befits an ambush scenario. So it's only going to be 4 turns long, and the United States has the initiative. The only advantage I've given the German side, don't know if you can see, so I'll zoom in, is that they do have the veteran ability. So they get re-rolls 3 times if they so want them. The basic rules of the game I'm not going to change, because the last thing you want to do is mangle the system. I wanted to make this work as an ambush scenario, which is why I've given the US the initiative and so many of the topographical and positional advantages they had in the film. But I didn't just want it to be a straight up slaughter fest with the Germans having no fun at all. So the alternating orders and system as given in the rules of this game will be followed. I am not going to use the solo system for this scenario. I did try using it with the solo system, but the problem with an ambush style scenario is that the solo system struggles to play either side very intelligently, but it particularly suffers as the Germans. You really need this to be a game between 2 players. And I would actually recommend, if anyone wants to copy this or come up with a better variant, more than likely, a lot of you guys have given this some thought already, use it as a teaching game where a very experienced player plays the hapless Germans and an absolute newbie gets the United States, and see where you go from there. Now, victory conditions. I'm still struggling to find victory conditions that work in this scenario. So this is very much still an experiment. What I'm working to at the moment is the US win if by the end of turn 4, German casualties are at least double their casualties. And that's in terms of number of unit counters removed from the board. Of course, the usual victory conditions apply if the enemy is unable to issue orders because of losses, or if their formation is broken by losses, then they lose anyway. The Germans win if the United States loses any 2 units before the end of turn 4. So I want this to feel dangerous for the US as well. So yes, they do start off blasting away at helpless Germans, but they don't get it all their own way, and the Germans do have the opportunity to damage them back. So let's see how it goes. Of course, if neither side achieves its victory conditions, then the game is a draw. So we've already set up. I haven't issued order tokens yet, but I have shuffled the decks and dealt initial hands. So the United States has Tactician, Advance, Speed Setup, and Thank the Helmet. Oh, I've decided on a 4-card hand, by the way. The Germans have Thank the Helmet, Fall Back, could be useful, that one, Battle Rage, and Burst into Action. If I get incoherent, apologies. It is a bit tough trying to play both sides and narrate at the same time, so any tactically stupid decisions are, of course, my fault, but we'll see how we do. So it's the orders phase. I'm not going to bother with dummy orders tokens as I'm soloing this. Now, as the US player, I am thinking that I want to knock out his strongest firepower units first. But before I do anything else, I'm going to play Tactician to get myself another valuable order token. So I start the game with 4 order tokens, which is really nice. And the first beneficiary is going to be the very badly exposed Lieutenant Parks. I want him to try and shoot up that Zundap, because we don't have any grenades in our force, but that's not a very strongly armoured vehicle. And I want him to hit the Germans before they know anything's hit them, if that makes any sense. For my second one, I would like to give it to that fire team over there, because I want them to try and take out that fairly vulnerable MG42 group while they're still in march order. My third one, I'm going to give to the 30 cal group in the field. I'd like them to try something, even if it's only a bit of suppression fire from that distance. And who am I going to give number 4 to? I think, who's likely to develop the most firepower in the near future? I might just give it to that support team who can try and kill off that German fire group, or at least seriously damage that German fire group at the head of the column. So that's that. Now, of course, I must remember that Clint is autonomous, which is really handy because I can activate him whenever I want, which is really nice, as long as I don't interrupt an activation in progress. So what about the Germans? They don't have anything that benefits their order tokens, so they are going to get the usual 3. Now, they have some really horrendous decisions to make, because no matter what they decide, it's not really going to end well for them on this turn. And I think as the German player, I probably want to try and preserve my groups that are most vulnerable, or at least get them to fight back while they can. So that, see, it's a tough one. My recon groups are harder to hit, as are the MG42 groups, but they're also more fragile. And if I give them order tokens, there's a very real possibility they may die without achieving anything. But I also have to consider that they have a higher chance of surviving the firestorm that's going to... survive the firestorm that's about to hit, because the US player has to roll higher. So I might prioritize trying to rescue that recon group over there. They're a bit hideously exposed too. I might give them an order. Turn one is going to be absolutely disgusting for the Germans, no matter what happens. Who else? Who else merits an order among you guys? No, I'm actually being foolish. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give that order to the MG42 group because if nothing else, they need to get to cover quick before they're murderized. And actually, the next one can go to that MG42 group. They're in less danger, but we need to start hitting back. And they're quite well placed to engage the 30 cal. So they'll have that order token. And then I will give the third one to that recon group because they're in the most danger. Hopefully they won't find themselves targeted, but you never know with these Americans. And the rest, I'm just going to have to hope they do all right. The German plan, of course, the best thing they can do is really try and fall back and find some cover and turn this into a regular firefight. But let's see what happens. I'm probably playing the Germans quite suboptimally, but I console myself with the thought that they've been taken completely by surprise. So let's see how we do. So starting with the first US activation, which is Lieutenant Parks over there. As I say, he's going to shoot at the Zundap. And the US don't have anything that can help him out, so it's going to be a straight dice roll. The Germans don't really have anything that can help him out either. So it's just going to be a straight dice roll. With my US hat on, I'm saying good luck, Lieutenant Parks. And he gets a total of 5. Dice roll of 3 plus 2, no, plus 1 for his firepower, a total of 4. Now I just need to check whether that, because the Zundap's armor is 4. And so as per the shooting rules, yes, it is equal. So unluckily for the Germans, this bad day begins with the Zundap going up in flames. And the lieutenant has done the side proud. So what are the Germans going to do? Well, I think staying out here is a really bad plan. So the Germans are going to move that machine gun MG42 unit over there and deploy it for action. So they've managed to escape from the ambush. Back to the United States. My fire team there is deprived of its immediate target. I was hoping to get the machine gun, but instead they can target that poor recon group who's out there. And so they're going to open fire and they get a +2. Ooh, terrible roll. And on a 3... yeah, they do not harm them. If you're wondering why I didn't cash in a veteran token to save the Zundap, given the odds, I didn't think it likely that it would survive anyway, and it didn't seem worth it in those particular circumstances. Of course, I will be a bit more generous with my use of the veteran tokens next time. So that fire team didn't achieve very much. What about the Germans? Their next activation is going to be that machine gun. Well, that crew really needs to deploy, so that's what they're going to do. So we now have 2 MG42s in protected positions, but can start raining fire back on the Allies one way or another. Hopefully they'll have something of an impact. And so it's back to the US. We have these guys in the field over here. Now that's a bit of a difficult shot. The Germans have got themselves into good cover there. +2 bonus to their protection, although we do have a +1, but we suffer a minus to our shooting because of the crops that are in the way. I don't know, really. They're not a threat this turn, but they will be a threat next turn. Because the other tempting target I could go for is that exposed recon group out there, but I mean, they'd get a bonus anyway because of my poor eyesight, thanks to the field. Do you know what? We'll try and take out our counterparts over there because they could cause a lot of mischief. So I'm going to make my roll. 2. Terrible shot. The Germans aren't even fazed by that. And in the meantime, this German recon group, difficult choice. They could stand and fight, but they're onto a bit of a loser there. And I think they simply, I don't know, how brave are we feeling? They only get +1 to their firepower. So they'd have to roll really high in order to damage the adjacent US units. I mean, really, they'd have to roll a 5 or a 6 to do it, and then they run the risk of destruction next turn. So I don't know what would a staunch here unit do in these circumstances. Although actually I shouldn't call them here because they're I suppose they are here, Panzerlehr. The Germans have already lost 1 unit, but they do have their veterans, so maybe it is worth it. They also have to be aware, though, that Clint is there and he's got autonomy, which could hurt them quite badly. I think I'm feeling a bit of a daredevil. Let's risk it. They will stand their ground and they will try and take out that support team, trusting to the fact that they're veterans to achieve what they want. They get a 3, which is not enough, so they're going to cash in a veteran token and roll again. Oh no, that's even worse with a 2. Okay, that was a very bad tactical call on my part. Not good, not good. So going back to the US, the support team here, now that they've effectively neutralized themselves by firing ineffectively at someone else, the support team is going to shoot at the very tempting target presented by that German fire group. And they get +2. There's no cover for the poor Germans, and they get a 1. Terrible, terrible shooting. This is not much of an ambush, I must say. So, yeah, that support team just wasted their shot. Appalling. Meanwhile, now that's everyone's regular activations, but we still have Clint, who's got his autonomy, and he's got a lot of targets within range. Now, in keeping with the requirement that the Americans simply kill off a load of German units, the weakest target facing Clint, and they are in range of his weapons, is that German fire group at the bottom of the road. So he's going to go after them. So he takes his shot. Ooh, he got a 5. That's not nice. The Germans aren't going to take that. They're going to cash in another veteran token and make him re-roll that. And he gets a 1. Very good call on the Germans' part. So Clint is having an off day. And he becomes activated. And so that brings us to the end of the action phase. So now we go on to the supply phase. And it is down to the US to make a move. Question is, do the US want to do very much moving? The only thing I would do... Actually, no, I wouldn't, because the only US units that can move, that haven't already activated, are already in perfectly good cover. Thank you very much. What I think will happen is the Germans are going to opt for falling back because they are in a very vulnerable place here. The question is, which way do they want to go? I'm going to backtrack a bit because I was a bit unfair to one of the German units. I forgot that they, foolishly, that they had burst into action. So I'm going to allow them to play it on the recon group to permit them to take their shot and then to fall back. So the Germans will all do that. They're going to do a heroic fighting retreat. The officer is going to go there. Bit risky, but it puts him in a good position to jump the US machine gun unit, which has fired, and the Germans have the initiative next turn. He's going to be joined by that recon group. And lastly, that fire team is going to tuck itself back there. And so that's it. That ends turn one. I'll just gather all these things up. Not the most satisfying start for the US, even though they did do fairly well. But they've now been a tiny bit compromised because the Germans, with consummate professionalism, I must say, have recovered from the initial shock and are falling back to a decent position with which to develop the firefight. Now, in terms of victory, if the game ends and the US have suffered 0 casualties, then I think it's only fair to treat it as a figure of 1, because otherwise they could cheekily win the game just by wiping out a German unit and then hunkering down. So they've got to kill at least 2 German units and suffer no casualties to meet their victory conditions. So it's now turn 2 and the Germans have the initiative. The US decide they're going to keep all their cards, so they drew 1 the previous phase. Yes, that could be quite handy if used on Clint. And the new card for the Germans, having spent their burst into action, is all-terrain. Again, that could be quite a handy card. But they're equally conscious this falling back is all very well, but they still need to damage some US units in order to win. The only one they're feeling good about at the moment is the gang that's closing in on the US machine guns. So how are we going to play this? I think, given they have loads of threats behind them, let's just do that. I think that they're kind of in the bag. I'm probably being overconfident, but I regard them as being in the bag. So I think the onus will be for the Germans to use those guys there to try and do some damage to the US line. And it does make sense to use the power of their MG42s to try and secure that. I think it would behoove them to try and do something with that lot. And then maybe, this is a bit risky, but I'm wondering whether to use Oberleutnant Hauser for an assault on the 30 cal. Or he could just shoot at them. Maybe shooting at them's the best option. Again, the Germans don't have any cards this turn that give them extra orders, but neither does the US this time. So what are we going to do? So we're back down to 3 orders. Oh, sorry, the Germans don't have a 4th order. What am I doing? Yes, let me change of plan there. I think we'll keep the orders on the 2 machine guns, and we'll have Hauser try and wipe out the 30 cal. They'll just have to trust to luck, I'm afraid, because there's better things the Germans want to do. As for me, I am definitely going to give my first order to the 30 cals because they might not be around very long. In theory, I wouldn't know what those numbers are, but let's just say I got lucky this time. As for the rest of my force, I am tempted to try and snipe easy targets, so my 2 support teams are going to get given orders to target the German units opposite them, which are falling back. And let's see what happens. Right, so it's the Germans go first. I'm putting Lieutenant Parks in terrible danger there, but I'm taking a bit of a risk. So the Germans activate their machine gun, and not unnaturally, they're going to target the exposed lieutenant. I'm hoping they'll either miss, or I could rely on that to save me if the worst comes to the worst. So the Germans make their roll. They get a plus 4. Ouch. 8. Okay, that's exactly what they needed. So poor Lieutenant Parks is not very happy. They just winged him. Right, what about my lads? Well, I think given that these fellows have no order marker on them, it makes sense for my machine gunners to target Oberleutnant Hauser. It's the clear and present danger here. And we get a 2. Nope, we do not touch him. Sigh. Meanwhile, the other German MG. It's a bit of a difficult shot, this. But they are going to attempt. It's plus 4. Are they going to try and kill Clint or suppress him? I think being a bit on the cautious side with this, the German MG42 is going to try to suppress Clint. So they double their firepower to plus 8. 10. Yep, poor old Clint gets a suppression token. They've pinned him down with heavy fire. Drat. Okay. Back to the United States. I'm going to activate the support team, and unsurprisingly, we're going to try and knock out that fire group. So we get a plus 2 to our roll. Come on. Our rolling's been appalling so far. Ooh, 7. That is nice. The Germans do not like that and insist that we re-roll it, cashing in their last veteran token. A 5. Unfortunately for them, it was a good attempt, but it was still enough for us to knock that unit down to its reduced side. So they're in a bit of trouble. Now, the Germans are feeling a little cautious. So while it is very tempting to have Oberleutnant Hauser go in with the bayonet, they're instead going to try for a shot. They're slightly regretting not keeping one of their veteran tokens back just in case, but he's very close. So he still gets the -1 for the poor visibility in here, but at a +1, he has a chance of doing it. Unfortunately, he's out of range for sniping at his